Oh, all right. I've got a page of notes, and some props in front of me, and I think it's time to talk about the tournament I just went through. G'day, I'm Mitch. Welcome to Lounge Room Hobbies, and look, nothing painting or building this week, which is a little bit different because I want to talk about a tournament that I just went through, my first ever tournament, and I thought it would be interesting to share some of what I experienced, thoughts I've had about it coming out of it, about list design and playing games and meeting a whole bunch of random people all in one go because, it was a place I didn't know with people I didn't know. And look, I think the bottom line in the opening is I had probably one of the best times playing Warhammer that I've had in my entire life, and it was a great 2 days. So let's get into talking about Everwinter 2020, which happened on the 28th and 29th of November at Jolt Games in Canberra. First up on the list is honestly tournament itself. It's 2020. It's the year of the global pandemic and quarantine and all that kind of stuff. And this is the first Australian tournament since I think it was the South Australian Grand Tournament back in March, maybe February. And look, I don't follow the tournament scene particularly well, but this was the one to go to apparently. Because of that, ended up with 38 players that included some of the best in Australia apparently for playing Age of Sigmar. And little old me with my Khorne army. So I won't bury the lead. I lost every game. The tabletop TO tournament list, the rankings, they'll maybe scrolling past here at this point, say that I got one win. I didn't. That was playing the tournament organizer. He was giving a win to anyone he played just because it was easier for him to not have to worry about the look of logging a few wins along the way. So it's a 1*4 for me. So moving on then, let's talk about my list. And again, I'll put that up on Off-Wall Scroll Builder and scroll past. I played Blades of Khorne. And no Khorne with the Archaon, no Marauders, nothing out of Slaves to Darkness. This was purely out of the Blades of Khorne battle tome. There was nothing special in this list. Like, there were no sneaky tricks. It was really throw some models on the table, try and hit hard in combat, generate lots of extra attacks with the Aspiring Deathbringer and the Blood Secretor, and having a Bloodthirster that was kind of tooled up to do a whole lot of damage in combat. So very Khorne, but still kind of different, I guess. It wasn't push it across the table and kill everything. There was some nuance and some movement to it, which I learnt really quickly playing 5 games over 2 days. I guess my point here is that I took a list that I was happy with and I was excited to play. I don't know that it was top meta. I mean, 5 losses probably says it wasn't. But I really enjoyed it and I learned a lot about the list really quickly. And I guess the first thing right off the bat is I took Karanak. I love this model. I love the background, and the poor old guy got into combat once the entire tournament. Never managed to summon his flesh hounds like he can, and I think, if I'm being honest, it's either I'm not sure how to use him properly in game, or he's just not working and I maybe need to drop him. So that's sad, but I kind of can't leave him out. I love the model too much. So I think this is just a point to make is you can go to a tournament, you can take a list that you love and have a great time and lose solidly. And I still think it was one of my best gaming experiences that I've ever had. Take away from that what you will. So, last minute hobby. If you've been watching along, I mean, you will have seen the building of my Rhinos, my Mighty Skull Crushers. That's just gone up recently. There's a few more videos coming, and because I'm not the fastest at editing, that I've filmed a whole lot and it's not up yet. Karanak being one, painting of the Rhinos. So I got this army done from about when the Bloodthirster went up to now, just after the tournament, was getting my 2,000 point army painted. And it was last minute. I was painting Skull Reapers the week before, and I was putting static grass onto these Skull Reapers the night before. I think it's this point, we'll cut away to a dramatic recreation of how I felt at that moment. maybe it wasn't that bad. It was fairly measured, and I did have the TV on in the background when I was doing it for real, so not too bad. But it was maybe something that I'd like to avoid in the future, which I can now. I have this 2,000 point list. I can take at the bare minimum this if I never add anything else. And that's something to think about if you're thinking about doing a tournament. If you've got the list all ready to go, it doesn't need to be the best tournament list. Just go and play because it's awesome fun. Not one person that I met had a negative thing to say about the army I was taking. They just could tell that I was super keen to be playing, and I was having a whale of a time, whether I was taking all my models off the table or getting to take some of theirs off with some attacks back. So this leads me then to the day of the tournament. I rock up into Jolt Games, place I've never been before. It's awesome. Look, there's some footage that I can lay over that I shot off my phone. It's a huge space for 38 players to fit into. There's 6x4 tables for every person, and it was just the vibe. Everyone was there, everyone was keen, and everyone was really into this hobby. So there's you have a common thing to talk about. It made it really easy to start chatting to people because your opening is, what are you playing? And then after that first game is, how did you go in that first game? And it made it so much easier to get to know some of these people. I ended up meeting some great guys that are all from Canberra. There were a lot of guys that came in from Victoria and Queensland. But I'm really keen to get to know the Canberra guys a bit more, go into the shop, play a bit more at Jolt. And that's something I'm going to do in the future. So first game against a guy named Joel. He was playing Beasts of Chaos, and I was super keen. This was going to be a great game. I'd never played Beasts of Chaos. I never played any of the armies that I played against. And it was just fabulous fun. It was one of the closest games of Warhammer I've ever played, and we came down right to the last 5 minutes of the 2.5 hour round. And I guess this is where I want to talk about gaming aids. It's not so much that I'm not going to give you a blow of all my games. I'm definitely going to throw up some pictures of the armies that I played against because they were beautiful and really interesting armies to play against. But watching Joel set up and play a season tournament player, I started seeing things that I could really use, or that I think it'd be really useful to make or own or buy. And I mean, I went into it with what I thought was enough, right? I did myself a 2-page kind of cheat sheet. I'll do a little bit of a better shot of this that kind of had all of my abilities and broken down into phase and what phase they could happen in and whether it was any hero phase and so on. And this helped immensely, and I still forgot things in every game without fail. I think my Bloodstoker, which happens at the start of the movement phase rather than the hero phase for everything else, I forgot to use his ability most games 3 or 4 or 5 times. And that's just that's just the nature of this pile of information. You look at it, this is a loaded up 2-page, piece of paper. There's a lot of info there. But I'd still recommend it for you because if nothing else, it got me staring at my book in writing it. It got me staring at all of my rules and really getting across them. The next thing is objective markers. I took a set of 28mm bases that had just been painted. They were old Markerlight symbols that I did for my dad when he had a Tau army. And they were great as objectives, but some of these guys, hopefully I've got a shot from one of the games with Joel, had 12-inch discs that were clear perspex that were marked with a center point and radiating circles, which means that you can always see when you place your models onto them whether they're within 6 inches of an objective or not. And I need these. I need to make these because it made the game faster and simpler and easier. You could see it on the table if it was in the right spot, and that's something that I definitely want. I'm definitely going to come up with a way to hopefully make them myself because I think it'd be cool to make them. The other thing is, because we were playing with terrain rules in the tournament, and this was given away as a freebie, is these, which are kind of poker chip markers for the type of terrain, right? So double-sided, so you've got both terrain tables on the number, and these were just made it so much easier to see what the terrain was because I needed a visual reminder. A dice on the terrain wasn't working for me early on. Of course, having said that, I'm pretty sure every game that I played, terrain rules were remembered for the first battle round, and then no one was thinking about them after that. So I wouldn't get too stressed if you can't get these. These were 3D printed and given out as freebies, and I think that's a really cool thing that there's freebies on offer because, why not? This is cool stuff. One thing I did take, which I think was a bonus, I took a piece of fabric with me, and I used it for marking objectives, not objectives, the territories. The diagonals or the straight edges, or for things like forcing the hand where, you know, you've got to mark out a weird rectangular square. And this isn't long enough, but I tell you, it was exactly what was needed. Just to kind of lay it out and not have to worry too much, not try and measure it with dice. It was just there and we were done. So I'm definitely gonna get a longer piece. I'll go raid my mum's sewing box for some longer ribbon. That's happening in the future. The thing I wish I had on top of that was a little kind of rectangular 3-inch by, 3-inch, 2-inch, 1-inch, half-inch measuring tool. Games Workshop have sold them before. There's lots of aftermarkets and 3D printed and laser cut wood ones, and they're amazing for piling in and measuring the small distances, but you can't get a tape measure into that space. That's something that I really want. I think that's it in gaming aids. I think that the big thing for me is that I wasn't 100% across my book because there's so much to hold in my head, but having this stuff and having all these little things sped up the games, sped up the rules, sped up the entire process, because 2.5 hours is not a huge amount of time to get a 2,000 point game in. So I've talked about results. It's an *1 for wins and 4 losses, and I couldn't care less. Every game that I played was down to the wire, apart from one. And the one the worst game was a total at the end, was playing Total Commitment, and it was 2 points to 21 points. And that was playing Beast Claw Raiders. 3 Stonehorns, they came across the board, did a whole bunch of mortal wounds, and my army went bye-bye. And I still enjoyed that game. It wasn't my favorite of the day, but I really thought that it was worthwhile. Just seeing how that army plays and realizing that I love my army for what it does, and that there are other armies that just don't appeal to me. And I think that was a cool thing. Rather than having to buy the army, build it, and play it, I understand that's not going to work for me. So this brings me to things I learned, and I think leading off with talking about that Beast Claw Raiders is a really good one. Dice rolling is huge for these games, right? You're going to roll handfuls of dice over and over and over and over again. And the general etiquette is you roll your dice where your opponent can see, and you pull your misses out and leave your hits in place so they can see them. Everyone I played did that perfectly. It was great. It wasn't even a have to ask, no one was thinking about it, and everyone was really chill about it. The thing that I found really hard, and this might just be me and how I read things, is that one of the games I played, the guy had a mix of dice with dots and dice with numbers, and he was rolling them interchangeably together, and I struggled to see all of that together. The dots versus the I don't know, numeral, I guess is the best way to say it. It was really confusing on the table for me, and I struggled with that. And I probably should have said something about it, but it was easy to just leave it be. That's something that maybe I would bring up in the future, or just say to you, if you're thinking about going to a tournament, one or the other, rather than mixing them together. The other thing that I think is really important is being able to explain your army well. I had a relatively simple thing that my army did, but there were lots of little details, and I felt like I always miss things, and I try and repeat them over and over and over again. And that was a hard thing to do, especially at game 5 on that last day where you're tired and it's, a hot room. And so that's something that I really want to work on, is a really clean, easy way to explain my army, what it does, and the key things that my opponent needs to look out for. Because it would be really easy to have my opponent do something and get trapped because I haven't explained a rule properly for me. And that's not fair on them, and it impacts their enjoyment of the game, and really I want everyone to have a great time. So that army explanation is super important. Which ties into rules, and oh God, there were so many rules when you start thinking about it. And it's not just your own army. I played 5 different armies, right? So that's 5, and these are 5 armies that I've never played before. I played Beast of Chaos, Ozark Bone Reapers, Disciples of Tzeentch, where it was an Archaon list, and some Acolytes, and then another Disciples of Tzeentch that might as well have been a completely different army because it was Acolytes and Horrors, but in a completely different format, and Beast Claw Raiders. And the amount of information coming at me from my opponent with no concept of what their armies did was a lot to hold in my head while also doing mine. And that's nothing that they did. That is just how it plays out, right? The only way I think I could ever understand it was by owning all the army books, and I just don't think that's something realistic to do where I'm going to these tournaments for fun. Maybe if I really wanted to get good, owning these books or playing them all is a way to do it, the way to learn these armies. And I think a simpler way and a much more fun way is just to go and play these armies heaps and see how they change and develop and what they do to me and how I react to that. But doing it 5 times over was a lot of information to take in. And you put on top of that some of the kind of tournament rules about how we were playing realms, put on that there was terrain rules, there was the additional overhead of the mission we were playing, and something fell off every now and then. Forcing the hand against Acolytes of Tzeentch, both myself and my opponent consistently forgot to pick the objective to be the target until midway through hero phase, and neither of us batted an eye about it, but you know, that's just what happens. It didn't have a big impact, and it was a super close game, but it's just, you know, something to think about. You're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna forget rules, and there's a lot of them, so at some point something's gonna slide. And as I said before, I think terrain rules got used, you know, in the first battle round of every game I played, and after that, both of me and my opponent seemed to either stop caring or stop remembering that that was a thing. And that was pretty consistent, so I'm not worried about it. I don't think anyone was going to bat an eye about it. If my opponent remembered, I was happy to play them. If I remembered, they were happy to play them. Other than that, there was no issue. And I guess this big rules overhead leads me to a big revelation for me, which is it's okay to ask someone to repeat their rules, and it's okay to ask someone to show you that rule in their book. But it can be awkward to ask because sometimes people are going to be upset that you're not trusting them. And I found that the simplest way to ask this was, I've never played this army before. I'd love to see the rule in the book. Because I have no idea what it does or doesn't do. And you could be telling me, and maybe you're telling me exactly word perfect, or maybe you're not, and maybe there's a little bit of nuance missing. And if I can read it, that really helps me. Not because you're not telling it wrong, but because I don't understand, because I'm just, you know, I'm 4 games deep at this point and my brain is basically Swiss cheese. And I think that way of asking it applies even if you've played the army before. You could say, I've only played this army once, or the last time I played this army was 12 months ago, I'd love to see the rule. No one's gonna bat an eye about it. Certainly that was my experience as I started asking that towards the end, and it just helped understand what was going on, and it stopped some sticky situations where maybe a rule would have caught me out later if I hadn't asked about it right then and there. So what is all of this talk of rules and army explanation and dice rolling and, you know, my list that's extra attacks? Well, it comes up with the idea that I can tweak this list now that I've got, this 2000 list. I can take it as it is, not even worry about it, but I can start messing with it and seeing how I can change it. And one of the first things that I wanted to do is take my list that had 9 separate things I had to deploy before I could start playing and take it to 3 separate things. Is something that I think would be cool to do first, by adding in another battalion and changing up some of the extras I've got. Means poor old Karanak here is going to get the big heave-ho, I think, for a little bit, but I think he's something that I'm going to have to look at ways to sneak in, because I really like it. It's a really different model. It's a really different rule set. I just think it confuses people when you throw in some stuff they're not expecting to see. So yeah, I learned so much out of this. In, you know, more bodies on the table is good, but things like my Blood Reavers, I thought, oh, they'll do heaps of damage, and then they've got a 6-up save, and most games I put them on the table and then I took them off the table, and that's about all they did. But now I understand, now I see their value as a screening trick, blocking out my opponent charging me, rather than them being the heavy hitter damage that I thought they were going to be. And if I wanted them to be that damage and heavy hitter, knowing that they need to be units of 20 or 30, not 10. It's these little things that I learnt rapidly over and over again across an entire tournament, and that's the stuff that I really, really enjoyed. Where does that leave me? Would I do another one? Absolutely. In fact, as far as I know, I think there's one happening in January, a one-day event, and there's no way that you can keep me away from it. There's also a league starting at Jolt that I'm going to get in and play, just to be playing games and learning more, because I loved every second of it. What would I say to you if you're thinking about a first tournament? Go. What if you don't know anyone? Go anyway. You're going to be talking to them, even if you just get in that first game. It's a great experience. I think that you would be remiss to miss out on this if it's something you've thought about doing. By the same token, if everything I'm saying you're screaming silently inside, don't go. You don't have to go to a tournament. Go to a casual gaming meetup. You're going to get a game in. It's going to be a pretty relaxed affair. You'll enjoy it. because you get to play something that you enjoy doing. Because at the end of the day, we're doing this because we like pretty models, we like pushing them around on a table, rolling a whole bunch of dice and having a laugh with someone when you remove your Blood Reavers for the 5th time over a weekend. And I think that's where I should leave this, honestly. It's that I couldn't care less that I lost. I couldn't care less that I did not get a win, because every game I played was one of the best games of Warhammer I've ever played. And that's a feeling that I want to go and experience again. So thank you for indulging and listening along. Maybe this has been helpful, maybe it's not, but hey, you listened and you hung out with me anyway, and that's really cool. There'll be, at the end of this video, there'll be a link to some of my previous ones. Probably the Rhino build at the moment would be the thing that I'd recommend going and checking out. Then you can go back and look at the Bloodthirster being painted or anything like that. And hey, while you're here, don't forget to hit subscribe. I'll put a link to my Instagram account in the video description so you can follow along at the next tournament. I posted a whole bunch of stories along the way, and you could have followed my epic downfall to, 0-5 in real time next time around. So maybe you'll hit follow and check out some of the stuff I post there. That's it from me this time. I'll see you guys next time on Lounge Room Hobbies.